Good morning, good morning, good morning. Coming to you from I was going to say sunny Arizona, but I think it's still dark outside. I haven't checked it. I've been up since about 4 o'clock. I've been doing some interviews. I was on iHeartRadio this morning. Everyone's talking about TikTok now, right? Finally, it's like we've been saying, hey, this is a problem when you're installing apps from potential countries that we call targets in cyber warfare. And now all of a sudden, everyone is super concerned about that. So I've been going for a couple hours, but this is my favorite part, right? This is what keeps me going. This is what pumps me up. So super glad to have you all here. And Vic, man, you make me smile, my friend. You make me smile. You were the first one this morning. Buenos dias, Dr. Cole. Uh, World-class security engineer checking in from Atlanta. And I love it too, Corey and Vicus and everyone. You guys were on early because I log in about, I'm a Mountain Time, so it was 7:20. So I logged in about 10 minutes early just to sound check everything, make sure we're in good shape. And there was already 5 or 6 questions. And that's awesome because A, it gets me to think about them, and B, it puts a smile on my face. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. So we have Corey jumping in first. Good morning, Dr. Cole. Started a new position, and I'm discovering the org has many basic opportunities for improvement. How do you recommend communicating this to management without constantly blaming the predecessor? So, a couple things here. First, let's just dig right into it. They replaced the predecessor. I don't know the details. I don't know if the person left. I don't know if they retired. I don't know if they were fired. But the point is simple. They put somebody different in the job, and that's you. And unless they specifically said, do not change anything, which I doubt they did, that they probably said, hey, it's yours. You're now in charge. Take the reins. So the first thing I want to communicate to you is asking for change, asking for doing things differently, and coming up with new approaches is not blaming the predecessor. It's growth. It's growth of the company. So I just want you to sort of remove that belief that those two are associated. So I would never go in and say, that previous guy, Bob, he didn't know what he was doing. He screwed. Like I would never go there, right? But if it's just, hey, this needs to be fixed or that needs to be fixed, it's just the evolution of security, right? Going in and saying, we need a new configuration management system, or we need better DLP, or we need an intrusion detection system. That's not blaming the predecessor. That's just pointing out the facts that something is not done and something needs to be done on that front. So yeah, I would just sort of remove that from your mindset that you're blaming anybody. No, you took over the reins and you're going to fix and adjust things. Now with that, I'm going to caveat. I would make sure you spend time to understand why the organization is where they're at. Why did the predecessor make the decisions that they made? What was the reasoning? What was the logic? Why is your organization where they are today? What was the decisions that led to that overall process? Because there might be some data there that you need. There might be some things that are helpful to you to understand why, when, where, and how you got to this current position. So you might have heard me say it before, but one of the most important things when you're new to an organization is you want to spend at least 30 to 45 days understanding the current environment. I want to understand. I want to understand and see what's been done. I don't just want to change things. You don't want to be the person that comes in and says, okay, new sheriff in town, we're changing everything just for the sake of changing it, right? I've seen new people come in, take over security, and they're like, well, we're changing the firewall. Why? Well, just because, right? I like a different vendor. And I'm like, well, just because isn't a good risk-based decision for the organization, right? You might not like the firewall that's there, but if it's up to date and it's working and it's good, it might be good enough. And that's probably not the smartest thing for you to focus on. So you do want to make sure you avoid I'm going to change everything just because, or what they sometimes do in politics, where when there's a change in the White House between parties, they basically just undo everything the predecessor did just because they were the opposite party. Not that there was right or wrong, right? It's just if the other party did X, I'm going to do Y just because you want to avoid that type of behavior. And then the last piece of advice I'll give you on this is always start with positive. So when you brief the organization, go, listen, the organization's in a pretty good spot. We have this and this and this. We have those areas that we've been doing really well. We're going to maintain that, and that's great. We're doing a really good job in these areas. But here's a couple of areas that I think we need to put some improvement against. So that's the key is you're going in and showing them, you're acknowledging that you've made progress. You don't want to be that person that says, everything's wrong. This is the worst organization I've ever seen on the planet. Everything is wrong. You don't want to be that person. Find some good things. We do security assessments and do a lot of briefings for clients. And one of the number one pieces of feedback we get from our clients is, Eric, you're one of the few organizations that when you actually briefed the board, the first thing you covered was the areas that were being done correctly, the positive impact that security has had on the organization. Then you go, and here's where we need to focus on now, right? Here's the new areas that we need to put energy and address against. But here's 3 things that have been done really, really well. And what that does is that sets a point that says, okay, we've done good, but we can do better. And that's the message you really want to get across. Other thing is, make sure you're prioritizing and focusing on a few things. Management executives and board of directors like when you go in and say, okay, here's a list of the top 5 risks to the organization, and I think we should fix 3. And then I'll come back in 6 months, because now you're giving a focused, prioritize. What you also want to avoid is what we call the dump truck, where you basically back up the dump truck and you're like, okay, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is, and everyone's just like so overwhelmed they don't even know where to start. So you want to start with the positive. You never want to mention the predecessor. You want to take time to assess and understand what's been done, and then you want to prioritize and recommend the few things at a time that need to be put in place within that organization. Next question. Hi, Eric. For a CISO to have a seat at the table, what should the CISO be a master of? Communication, listening, and knowing when to talk. The biggest issue I have when I'm coaching CISOs, and the biggest complaint I get about CISOs sitting in a board, is they don't listen and they have their own agenda. So did you ever see a case where somebody, they already decide what they want to say, and they're in the meeting and they're not listening, they're just waiting for somebody to stop talking so they can talk, and they just want to, and it's sort of one of those things you often see a lot in the CISOs where there's this great conversation, and then the CISO blah, and everyone sort of looks at each other going like, what does that have to do with anything? Right? It's totally off topic and it's not in line with anything. So everyone sort of looks at each other, sort of nods, and then ignores it and basically goes back to the conversation. Right? That's what you want to avoid. You want to listen to the flow of the conversation, see where it's going, and in areas that you have expertise, you then want to contribute something valuable. That's ultimately what's going to get you back at the table and going to get you invited over and over again. They're going to go and say, basically, 2 questions. Did Eric disrupt the meeting at all? Because if you're disruptive and you're not valuable, you're done. So you want to make sure at a minimum, you're not doing a negative contribution. But second, they're going to say is, did he add any value by being there? Was the meeting better and more informed because Eric was sitting at the table? And that's the number one reason when I go and I say, why don't you invite the CISO to the board meetings, the number one response is, well, Eric, they're there, but they really don't add any value. Right? We've had them at 3 meetings in a row, and they really don't add a whole lot of value to the meeting. So why should we keep inviting them? Now, here's the balance. And this is a great question that CISOs push back at me going, but Eric, you said that I should only speak about topics that I'm knowledgeable on, but what if the conversation never goes to cyber? What if it never goes into that area? Then how do I add value? Now, my question is this. You're telling me that there's a 2-hour meeting where they're talking about a business that runs on computers that have critical data, and the accessibility, availability, confidentiality, and integrity of that data is critical to the business. And you really want me to believe that that never, ever came up at any point in the meeting? Right? It did. You're probably just not listening. So there's a fine line where it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. On the one hand, I'm saying don't hijack the conversation. If they're talking about X, don't derail it to Y. But on the other hand, if they're talking about X and there's another aspect to X that could hurt the company or hurt the business or hurt the organization or help the business or help the organization, then you absolutely do want to chime in. And I'll give a great example. Recently at a board meeting where they're rolling out a brand new application for the iPhone. And they're talking about the feature set and did we meet the minimal features that the customer wants? And are we sure this is aligned with a competitive advantage and all those factors? And there was a pause. I just said, hey, can I chime in? Because one thing I'm noticing is that more and more customers are concerned about security and the security of the organization. And right now we have security, but it's turned off because we're following what our other vendors do. What if we actually were the first vendor to actually have some security turned on by default? That would actually send a message to our consumers, and that would actually be a very positive impact in the industry. And it was sort of the pause, and everyone's like, wow, that's an interesting angle, right? That's really a cool thing to think about that we never did. That was my sole contribution over a 2-hour meeting. And I had board members come up to me afterwards going, Eric, that was such an insightful piece to add because we never even thought about using security as a competitive advantage, using it as a differentiator in the market. And by the way, can you come, because I sit on other boards, can you come and talk to my board about that one item? So it's not the length of time you talk, it's the value you add. So that was probably 30 seconds in a 2-hour meeting, but I had impact. So that's what you really want to think about in the meeting is how can I add value? So when people leave, they go, the meeting is better because Eric is there. The meeting is better because Vikas is there. So it's really mastering the art of listening, communicating, and adding value to the conversation. And believe it or not, that's a skill, like any other muscle, you need to work it. Most people are not very good at it. Right? Just if you want to have fun, we're getting into the holiday season, and there tends to be holiday parties and things like that you go to. Spend some time walking around a holiday party, just observing. And you'd be amazed. I did this last week, and I sometimes just do it for fun. And I was amazed of how many times I went to a conversation where there were 3 people talking, and they talked for 20, 30 minutes, and there were 3 separate conversations. Right? Person A would talk about blah, blah, blah. Person B would be talking about something different. And they just each take turns, talk about their own thing. And I'm like, that's really not a conversation. They're basically having one-way dialogue with themselves, and there just happens to be another person across from them, right? So practice it. How can you really listen and how can you actually add value. And this is also a great thing in building relationships because there's the old saying, it's not what you say that matters, it's how you make the person feel. So start practicing that every time you're in a conversation, you want that person to leave better off for talking with you. And then that same skill will resonate into the boardroom. But that's really what world class executives and world class CISOs really focus on. And then Corey's question is similar. Any recommendation on how to get a seat on a board of directors as a cybersecurity expert? So slightly different, right? The first question was, what should you do to master it? And this one is, how do you get the seat? One member at a time. The way you get a seat on a board of directors meetings is by having one of the members recommend you. So the trick is find who is on the board. And the nice part now is between websites and LinkedIn and social media, it's so easy. I mean, you spend a few minutes doing it and you can figure out who they are pretty quickly. And I'll give you a great little exercise that I do with folks. And I call it the spider web exercise. So I use mind mapping software to do this. You can do it on paper and pencil, whatever app you want, but you graphically is the best. So in the center, you have a circle and you want to write your goal. Be on 5 boards of companies. Then I want you to go in and around it, I want you to create 10 circles and I want you to write 10 companies that you want to be on their board. 10 different companies. Now, you might say, oh, Eric, I just want to be on one. Okay, what about in 5 years? What about in 10? What about in 20? Right? But find 10 companies, actual companies that you believe you're a good alignment for. Then on the outside of that circle, I want you to list all of the board of directors. So I want you to list all of the board of directors. So now let's say there's 5 board members at each company. Usually it's a little more, but I'm just doing easy math for us this morning. And you have 10 companies. That's 50 people. Then I want you to start for each one of those people. I want you to go in and say, who do they hang out with? Who are their friends? What other boards do they sit on? What other members are there? And what you're basically doing is building out the list of names of connections. So you have the first degree, second, and what will happen is you'll get to a point where you're going to know somebody. You're going to be, wait a second, I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so who knows so-and-so. So then you go in and you ask the person, hey, can you introduce me to this person? Can you introduce me to that? And now basically you're deliberately and strategically targeting individuals that you want to get to know so they could see your expertise, so they could ultimately recommend you to the board. Now, some people just do one level. You find who the board members are, you go into LinkedIn and you start DMing them saying, hey, I work in cyber. I'd love to have a conversation. I'd love to see how I can help you. I'd love to see what I can do. And that does work. But sometimes it doesn't. And then in those cases, you maybe need an introduction from another person. Because let me tell you a hint. The most powerful introduction is one done by somebody else. So just imagine the 2 scenarios. I come up to you and I say, hey, Corey, we haven't met, but I think I can help you. I have expertise in cybersecurity, and I'd like to give a free presentation at your next board meeting. Is that something you think you can arrange? Yeah, that comes across okay. And if you have the need and it's something that's important, it might work. But Corey, imagine this. You go to a meeting and you're talking to a friend saying, hey, I'd really like to find somebody to present on cybersecurity. And your friend goes, you know something? Best in the business is Eric Cole. You got to talk to Eric. And then you go talk to somebody else, or you talk to another friend or colleague, and you're talking about, yeah, I think our board should have cybersecurity. And they go, you know something? I heard there's this guy, Eric Cole. I saw him present at a conference, and he is just top notch. Which of those two are more powerful? Me coming to you directly, or me getting to your influencers and them recommending to me? So it really depends on how serious and how much you want to play the game. But those are the two strategies. The second strategy takes longer, but is going to be much, much more effective than the first. So if Corey, you're just saying, hey, you think it'd be cool to get on a board, just reach out because you only need one. If you want to build an entire business and you want to be the go-to person to sit on boards, then do my second method. It's going to take more time, energy, and effort, but it will get you to where you need to be. So you've, hold on, my screen is scrolling all over the place. Okay. So we got Zach is in the house. You've mentioned knowing a change was coming to the industry prior to COVID. What's next on the horizon? Any major shifts in the industry? Great question. Now, just to be clear, the big change in the industry was the ability to work anywhere, any place, anytime. Right. That was sort of the change that I knew was coming. Now, I didn't know if it was going to be in the form of a recession and they were going to close offices, or people were going to travel more, or honestly, I didn't see the pandemic coming. So I will not take credit for seeing COVID, but I did know that companies did want to have an environment where you could work anywhere. You basically had a computer, and no matter where you were, you could work. You didn't have to be in the office. You could be anywhere in the world. So that was sort of the change I saw coming, that we had a lot of companies be very proactive on. The next change that I see coming is really the consolidation or collaboration of IT and security. This idea of having a CIO and a CISO isn't working because they're more competitive than complement. Now, yes, there's a few cases where if the personalities are perfect, it could work, but it's working because of the personalities of the individual, not because of the alignment. And I see this all the time where I have somebody going, Eric, I am so frustrated. I'm like, you used to love your job. And they're like, yeah, because the old CIO and me got along and that CIO got replaced. And now there's a new person and we butt heads all the time and we have conflict and we don't get along and there's issues because the structure doesn't work. You need to have one person in charge of both. And of course, I'm biased because of a simple reason. What are you compensated on? The problem with the CIO being in charge of both is the compensation structure for a CIO is uptime availability. That's it. They don't get penalized if there's a breach. They don't get penalized if there's issues or problems. All they get penalized if the data is not up and available. So what do you think they're going to focus on? Uptime availability. But we're missing a big chunk. CISOs, on the other hand, are compensated based on security, confidentiality, integrity, availability. So they're compensated on uptime, protection of the data, control of the data, and minimization of breaches. So they're in a better position to make sure the core functions of both security and IT get handled and get done. So I really believe over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see the shift where CIOs report to the CISO or go away. And you're just going to have a cyber division that handles all technology, that handles all the information. So the trick is this. How can we integrate security and IT together? How can we get them working more closely together? So it shouldn't be one or the other. It should really be an integrated team. So that's really the things you want to start thinking about. And the people that are masters at that are going to make a ton of money. If you look at during COVID, anybody that had experience, methodologies, or systems that allowed for remote workforce made tons of money. Those people were on high demand. They could sell anything they wanted to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So if you're looking for a new area, what if you became the master and you had a system and model and methodology for seamlessly integrating IT and security together? That's going to be something that companies are going to be very, very interested in and something they're really going to want. So, whether within your organization or as a business model, that's going to be something that's pretty big. Uh, so, so Tom says, how agree to disagree? So he has another one. So conversation, IT for sales. No, it's impossible, but yes, you can do it. Okay, Tom, I'm going to try to read between the lines. I think what you're asking here is how do you sort of have that conversation where we talk about you want security to say yes, not be the no person, but what if it's something that really can't be done? So what it comes down to is when you're having a conversation with IT sales going, what you're proposing could be possible, but let me explain what has to be done in order for that to happen. So that's what I call sort of the maturity level one conversation, where you're telling them, yes, that this is something that possibly could be done, but let me show you the complexities that are involved with it. Level two, maturity level two is what is the real problem you're trying to solve? So don't tell me that you want to create a portal where all of our salespeople can access all of our intellectual property and trade secrets from the internet using a password. Right? That's a solution. What I'd like to hear from you is what is the problem you're trying to address? What is it that you're trying to solve here so we can come up with the best solution possible? Because here's the biggest issue. You have folks that don't understand how the technology works and operates, trying to create technology solutions. And that's where this problem really originates from. Instead of somebody in marketing or sales coming to you saying, we need to have a remote sales force that while our salespeople are on the road, they could demo products to our clients. That's a great problem. And that's a great way to come to IT security. The issue is they tend to go in without really understanding or knowing what the issues, challenges, or risks are. And they just go, oh, the best way to do this is set up a portal where all of our data is available to anyone, anywhere, anyplace, anytime. It's like, wait a second. What turned you into the expert that now you're going to create a solution that makes no sense, that's inferior, that's very, very expensive, and now you're going to push the agenda on this ridiculous solution? And Tom, I think that might be where you're getting at with the impossible there. So what you want to do is push it back a couple steps, going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's step back and look at what the problem is. And then let the experts figure out how to solve that. Now, you don't want to say it that way because it comes across a little arrogant, but it's basically like, hey, why don't you tell us the problem so we can then come up with the solution? And then sort of the level three maturity is, hey, that's a great idea, but what if I showed you something cooler? What if I showed you a better way to solve that? It would be cheaper, better, faster, and have more functionality. So that's the trick is don't say no, say here's a better option. Here's a better option that we can show you or give to you. on that front. So it's not really an agree to disagree. It's, can we get to a point where we're at the same level? And this is in negotiation tactics. I'll go a little into it. It's called chunking up. And the idea is this: let's take the issue and move it up to a point where we're at a higher enough level that we can agree. And then we chunk back down. So I'll give you an example. Somebody comes to you and says, we want to set up a portal where all of our data and all of our information is accessible anywhere, anyplace, anytime to anyone on the internet. We want to do that. You don't want to do that. So you're in a disagreement point. So let's chunk up. Do we agree that data needs to be accessible to our employees? Yes. Great. We both agree. So I just chunked up to a point where we agree. Excellent. So we both agree that we need to have data available to our clients. Excellent. Do we agree that that data needs to have some level of security, because if it was accessible to our client, to our competitors, it could hurt our business? Great. We agree to that. Awesome. Do we agree that anything we can do to reduce the sales cycle and make more sales is good for the organization? Awesome. We agree on, look at how many things we agree on, right? We're really in agreement, right? And then once we have many points of agreement, then we say, okay, now that we understand what we're in agreement with, let's figure out the best solution that meets all those agreement points. So what you basically did is, instead of doing this, which is what a lot of security people like to do, going, this is stupid, this is crazy, this can't be done, you basically said, let's go up here. We agree, great. Now let's work together. Now that we know we agree on everything, let's now work together to come up with a solution. So it's basically a different way of addressing it. And we train a lot of security teams on it. And it's a very, very effective methodology. So that would sort of be my recommendation of how to tackle that. So Akam, in security, we always hear, make the design, the code, the algorithm open. But why the government don't like this idea? For example, no one knows what algorithms use to encrypt their top secret information. So a couple things here, I guess. Are you talking about cryptography? Because it sounds like that's sort of the trick there. So with cryptography, if it's done correctly and you publicly disclose the algorithms, it does not make it any easier for somebody to crack. That is a mathematical fact associated with cryptographic algorithms. So if you have a cryptographic algorithm in which, if somebody knows the design and the code and the algorithm, it makes it easier for them to break, then that's a weak algorithm. Because the way the mathematics work in your asymmetric and symmetric algorithms is, even if you know the algorithm, even if you know how it works and how it functions, without a key, it doesn't make it any easier for you to break. And it's similar to a lock. I can know how a lock works. I can know how a lock operates. But if I don't have the unique key, it doesn't make it any easier for me to break in. It doesn't make it any easier for you to get access. So really the differentiation, Akam, that we're talking about on the crypto is the algorithm versus the key. So it really is true. If you're having algorithms that can't be public and have to be proprietary, there's a problem. Because if the math was sound enough, you can make that public and available. I would disagree a little, though, is the US does make their algorithms public. Right? If you look at the NIST, if you look at the FIPS standards, it actually tells you which algorithms the government uses. Right? The algorithms are known and public. It's the keys that are kept secure, protected, and private. Blazin is saying your videos are so good. Got a page of notes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Glad to hear that, Blazin. Thanks for the feedback. Does a CISO need to be strongly from a GRC background or from a core technical background? Yes. It's like you're asking me, does a good pilot need to be able to take an airplane off or land an airplane? It's sort of like, yeah, you need both, right? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be on a plane if the pilot is only good at taking off and they don't know how to land, or they're only good at landing and they don't know how to take off, right? Both skills are required to be a world-class CISO. So what you're really asking me is, do world-class CISOs need to have business and technical backgrounds? And the answer is yes. Now, typically one will be slightly stronger than the other. Most CISOs, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, most CISOs tend to come from a technical background and have learned business informally, either by reading, by attending meetings, by getting mentoring, or even taking some classes. So they don't necessarily have the actual experience. Now, the best scenario would be somebody who had 3 to 4 years in business, regulation compliance, somebody who had 3 to 5 years in technology, and merge them together. But as long as you can understand and speak both languages, that's really what matters. So it's really making sure you have both of those areas. It doesn't matter which background you come from, you just have to have knowledge and experience in both of those. Eric, I want to remove local admin from our employees. Approximately 35% have it. 1,000 plus size organization. Other than management buy-in, what is the best way to approach it? So to me, the best way to approach it is why. Not why you're doing it, why do they have it? Why does 35% of your organization have admin access? What is the reason? Is there an actual valid reason for doing it? Now, if there is, we had one client that had this hokey piece of software that would only work and only run if you have local admin access, and it was needed to run a business unit. So in that case, we had security folks that they were fighting the wrong fight. They were fighting the fight, we need to get rid of admin access, and they kept trying to do it, but here's the issue. If there's a critical app that's needed to run the business, that's making money for the business, and unfortunately needs admin access, you broke the golden rule of security. The golden rule of security is, if you negatively impact the business, you're wrong. So if you now pull local admin and you break an app that's needed to run the business that makes revenue and hurts the company, you're wrong. So the real fight was, we need to get that software replaced. We need to find an alternative and get that software replaced as soon as humanly possible. Because once that software was removed, removing local admin became a no-brainer. So the question I want to ask you is the why. And there is no reason, right? If you remove local admin and there's zero impact to the business, awesome. Let the execs know, but there's really not any issue there. But if you're removing local admin and it's going to hurt the ability for them to function, you need to figure out what that is and get that fixed. So the removal of local admin is a non-issue. If cyber defense, risk management, vulnerability management, IT compliance, and security architecture are all under the CISO, then does the CISO need to be a master in all those domains? Nope. And it's real simple. Look at a large company. Let's look at Amazon. Now, he's no longer the CEO, but let's just go back to Jeff Bezos when he was the CEO. Amazon does e-commerce. They do third-party reselling. They do web services. They do security. Do you think Jeff Bezos understood and was a master of all those areas? No. He had people underneath him that were. Jeff Bezos understood business at a high level, and he had people underneath him that could translate back and forth. So when we're talking about a CISO being in that position, they're going to have directors under them that handle each of those areas. The CISO needs to understand the language of cyber and business. And what the CISO needs to be obsessed with is, what are the top risks in technology that could negatively impact the entire business? That's really what a CISO is obsessed with. They're going to have people reporting to them. They're going to be able to ask the right questions. They're going to understand generally, but they're not going to have to be a master in all those domains, because that wouldn't work. If you're saying for people to report to somebody, that person needs to know everything those people do, that's never going to happen, right? So they're going to just be a master in risk management, and then they're going to have directors and people under them that know and understand each of those expertise. For example, a production manager. Okay, so then you just gave an example. Sorry, I didn't read. Company is export. Yeah. Well, once again, they're going to have people under them that are really going in and understand and know those different areas. So it looks like we have time for one more question, and we have one more question left. So awesome. I watched your Life of a CISO episode on board reporting and was wondering if you can provide some examples on risk and likelihood, cost of a breach, and cost to fix it. Of course. So we go in, and one of the big risk areas is ransomware. Now, I'm going to do a caveat. Normally, when we want to explain risk to execs, we want to do it in non-technical language. We don't want to go in and use cybersecurity language to describe the risk. So normally I would say the risk is our data is not available to those who need it. However, because ransomware has really become a business term, ransomware is no longer a technical term. It's a business term that everyone understands. That's the reason why I would use it there. But the real risk is our data would not be available when and where we need it. Now, if you look at the type of company you're in, if you're in healthcare, finance, those types of areas where you must have access to your data in a very quick, timely manner, you would say the likelihood is probably 90%. Now, don't get caught up in slight variation. So I was in a meeting with somebody who's like, well, Eric, I think it's 85. They think it's 93. Just take the average. I mean, we're not. Now, if somebody says it's 20% and you say it's 90, you have a disconnect and you need to figure that out. But if you're off by 5 or 10%, who cares, right? This is not an exact science here, right? We just want to get a general number. So if you say 95 and I say 85, pick 90 and go with it. Don't try to make this a mathematical problem, because it's not. So in that industry, you'd say 90. Other industries, you might say 80%. So that is something that is likely. It is likely to occur today. So that would be 80 or 90%. Then you would go in and say, okay, if that happens, if our data is not available based on the size of our organization, what would be the reasonable ransom payment? That's if you're a mid-size, it's probably going to be 400, 500K. If you're a large organization, it's probably going to be 2 to 3 million. So you have your ransom payment. Then, if it takes 3 or 4 days to negotiate and pay the ransom, how much money do we lose if our data is not available for 24 hours? And then multiply it by 4 or whatever number the days are. So that then you're doing all that and say, okay, if our data is not available, we're going to also lose $2 million a day. So great. So assuming the ransom payment's $2 million, it takes a couple days to do that. 4 days, that's 8, so 10 million. So now we have our data not being available. The risk is ransomware. It's a 90% chance of occurring. If it occurs, it'll cost us 10 million. And then the question is to put in backup solution or other options or ways to protect against ransomware. What would that cost our organization? So you go out to 2 or 3 different vendors, you get quotes, you find out what that cost is, and then you come back and say 500K. So that's sort of the general process that you're going through. Remember, you want to get close, but it's not exact. Because if you try to make this a mathematical problem with an exact answer, it's going to be too hard, too difficult, and take too long. So that brings us to the end of our 45 minutes. Once again, get here early, right? Log in 5-10 minutes early, get your questions, and you notice the questions that come in first, not only do I answer first, but when there's less questions, I tend to give more detailed answers. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you're enjoying the Life of a CISO podcast. If we can help you in any way, shape, or form, we're going to continue to give you this free content. But if you want to accelerate and you want to look at any of our paid programs, we have some entry-level ones, we have some higher-end ones, or some of the paid coaching opportunities with me. Just reach out to ecole@secure-anchor.com, ecole@secure-anchor.com, and someone on my team will get back to you, and we'd love to hook up to you, and I would love to work with you on a more direct basis. So hope you have an amazing week. Hope things are going awesome. I know we're in December and many people celebrate different holidays. So I just want to start wishing you a happy holiday, because I know some holidays we're right in the middle of it, and some come a little later in the month and even in January. So just want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you all next week, and have a wonderful week. Take care, and I'll see you soon.